Before we start today's lesson, you will need a pen, some paper and exercise book, and unless you're viewing this video on a mobile phone, turn off all mobile phones and remove any distractions. In today's lesson, we're going to look at how gas exchange occurs in plants. But first of all, let's have a quick starter and see what we can remember from last lesson about the parts of the body. So can you label the parts B and C? 30 seconds, off you go. Okay, so B, you could have put a rib or the rib cage. I would accept either. And C is the diaphragm. Okay, so we're continuing with our topic about how do living things breathe and respire to stay alive. And today we're going to look specifically at how gases are exchanged in the leaf of a plant. Before we do that though, I'd just like to remind you about the particle model of gases. Particles in a gas are not touching and are spaced apart and have gaps between the particles. Particles in a gas have large amounts of energy. This means that they can move around quickly in all directions. They have a random arrangement. So thinking about how gases move about and looking at the image on the left, have you ever noticed how smells travel across a room? The gas particles will start off all close together, and then because of their energy they will move apart from each other. This process is called diffusion. The definition of diffusion is the net movement of particles from an area of high concentration, so that's where there's lots of particles together, as we can see on the left, to an area of low concentration. That means that they're as spaced out as they can be. We do need to remember this definition, so I'd like you to write this in your book now. That's great then. So thinking about the gas particles and how they move, what factors do you think will affect the rate of diffusion? So how fast the diffusion happens? I'm going to give you 30 seconds to think about that. Okay, so the kind of things that would affect the rate of diffusion is the surface area, the diffusion pathway, the concentration gradient, and the temperature. So today's lesson was about gas exchanges in leaves, but why do plants need gases? We can see from the diagram that leaves will absorb carbon dioxide and they will produce and release into the air oxygen. And you should remember from earlier in the year, or in year 7, that The process of photosynthesis uses carbon dioxide and water and produces glucose and oxygen. The plants use the glucose to be able to grow. Now, thinking back to year 7, I'd like you to copy and label this plant cell. Right then, let's see how you got on. Take a different coloured pen and mark your work if it's correct, and if it needs changing then please do so. If you have to stop the video, that's fine. So starting at the top then, we have the cell wall. This is only present in plant cells and is there to aid structure. Next we have the cytoplasm. This is in both plant and animal cells and is where the chemical reactions in a cell will occur. Next we have the cell membrane. Again, this is in both plant and animal cells, and the cell membrane will control what flows in and out of the cell. The green parts then are the chloroplasts. These are only present in plant cells and are where photosynthesis occurs. Okay, the big part in the middle is the vacuole. This is only present in plant cells and contains the cell sap. And then finally we have the nucleus, which contains the DNA for the cell. Okay, so we've just reminded ourselves about cells. Let's just see how they fit together in the big picture then. So we have cells that might be similar. They will join together with other cells that are different to form tissues. These then form organs, followed by organ systems. So when we look at leaves today, we are looking at one of the organs of a plant. Looking a bit more detail then at the structure of the leaf, you can see that there are a number of layers. There's the epidermis, there's the mesophyll layer, which contains both palisade and spongy mesophyll cells. We have a moist air space, we have guard cells, and then we have stoma. Just looking at it as a cross section then, you can see that the gases will move in and out on the lower layer. This will occur through the stomata. The gases will enter and leave the leaf through the stomata on the lower surface of the leaf. The stomata can open and close. The guard cells are the cells that are responsible for opening and closing the stomata. In bright light, the guard cells will take in water, and that makes them become plump and turgid and the stomata open. But in low light, the guard cells lose water and become flaccid, causing the stomata to close. Putting these two things together, this means that the stomata will be open during the day and closed on a night. Why do you think this is a good thing? Yeah, that's right. Photosynthesis is going to predominantly happen during the day because it needs light for it to occur. So during the day, the plants will need to absorb carbon dioxide and release oxygen as part of the photosynthesis process. But on a night, when they're not photosynthesizing, they don't need to do that. Right, so I'd just like you to answer the following questions to summarise what we've covered so far. So there's 6 questions. You can either write your answers in full sentences or write out the question and then the answer afterwards. But I'd like you to tell me what we call the movement of gas particles from an area of high concentration to an area of low concentration. I'd like to tell me which gas is absorbed by plants and which gas is released by plants. I'd like you to write the word equation for photosynthesis. Can you tell me what the function of a stoma in a leaf is? Stomata is the plural, so leaves usually have many. And compare the number of stomata in the upper part of the leaf compared to the lower part of the leaf. That's quite a lot, so I'm going to give you 5 minutes. If you need more time, then pause the video. Right, let's see how we got on then. So the movement of gas particles from an area of a high concentration to an area of a low concentration is diffusion. The gas which is absorbed by a plant is carbon dioxide, and the gas which is released by a plant is oxygen. The word equation for photosynthesis is carbon dioxide plus water forming glucose plus oxygen. The function of the stoma is to open and close and allow carbon dioxide to enter and oxygen to leave. And the lower part of the leaf has more stomata than the upper side of the leaf. If you need to pause the video at this point to correct any of your answers, then please do so. Right, let's just go back to the beginning then, when we talked about diffusion, and we said that surface area, diffusion pathway, concentration and temperature all affected the rate of diffusion. Okay, so when the stomata open and close for the carbon dioxide to enter and the oxygen to exit, water can also be lost from the leaf by evaporation. Why might this be a problem for the plant? Okay, so remembering that leaves are primarily there to photosynthesize. So carbon dioxide will enter the leaf via the stomata through the process of diffusion, because there will be more carbon dioxide on the outside of the plant than there is on the inside. But we also need water for photosynthesis. So we need the water to stay in the plant so that it can photosynthesize and produce glucose, which will allow the plant to grow. Plants then have got various ways of adapting themselves to be able to photosynthesize better so that they can grow, and also to limit the amount of water which they may lose. Let's watch a short video.
Plants use the glucose they produce to grow, so most plants are adapted to make as much glucose as possible. There's always a good supply of carbon dioxide from the air, but the amount of light and water can be limited. How might a plant cope if it lives somewhere very dry, or in a place where there isn't much light? The shape and size of a plant gives you clues about the environment it grows in. What if the amount of light is limited?
Deep on the rainforest floor there's not much light, so the leaves arrange themselves in a whorl to grab any bit they can. You can tell these leaves live in dark, gloomy places, big loads of chlorophyll to suck in any light they can. More clues here. Small leaves, much paler green. These live with us bucket loads of light.
In dry places, plants have found ways of limiting the water lost through leaves.
To help prevent water loss, this leaf's got a furry surface which traps the moisture in the hairs. You can tell this plant comes from a dry place because it's evolved not to have leaves at all. It stores water in its thick, succulent stems. Plants in dry places have very deep roots. You can tell this one's from a wet place because the roots are on the surface because the air's full of moisture.
Okay, so thinking about the video that we've just watched, I want you to name differences that you may see in plants that live in hotter climates compared to those that live in cooler climates. And if you can you also explain why plants will lose more water during the day than during the night? You might want to think of the stomata for that. 3 minutes. Okay, so here we have 3 examples of plants that you might find in a desert habitat. The kind of adaptations that they have, the one on the left has got a waxy layer which helps to store water and prevent evaporation. The one in the middle has got prickles on it which will stop plants coming and eating the plant to get the water. And the one on the right has no leaves, and that prevents water loss through transpiration. The other question I asked you about was why might a plant lose more water during the day than it will on a night? Well, if you remember, the stomata are open during the day and they're closed during the night. So therefore, during the day, plants will lose water through the stomata via the process of evaporation. Right, that completes today's lesson. So now if you go back to your Google Classroom and complete the Google form, that will have a few questions that just summarises what we've covered today.